that's the start. Basically, I just became overcome with interest in a particular topic, and then I had to know more about it. And I thought there might be other kind of nerds out there wanting to know about it. The thesis, by the way, it's now out in a book. It's called The Feeling of Value by Sharon Hewitt. I recommend that one to listeners also. It's academic meta ethics, but I do think it's one of the best arguments for moral realism out there.
Wow. Okay. Could you explain a little bit more? Yeah, please give us the lay of the land here. If you read it a few times, that I'm sure you can at least go into a brief.
Yeah. So the problem of ethics, I think, is finding value in a physical universe. And this is actually a point where I disagree with the author of the thesis. She is not a physicalist about consciousness as I am. So she's not. So I believe that consciousness is a physical property, and I believe that it is in consciousness that we will locate moral value if we are to locate it at all. I'm not. I've since actually become a little bit more skeptical about both moral realism and utilitarianism, which is somewhat ironic given that I started out hosting the utilitarian podcast. I'm not sure this ethical theory can stand up to scrutiny in the end, but I do think it's the best one we have. And so that counts for at least something here.
Yeah, interesting. I saw that your background is also in philosophy, or at least to parts of extent. My background is also in philosophy and of science mostly, but yeah, we went up and down that ladder as well. And I think it's interesting that those are a few of these questions where really, like, even centuries later, there's still some really, really succinct open questions that I think we still need answering. And perhaps now with AI really kicking off, we get some more data points. Do you have any hope that we will learn more in the next 10 years than we may have had over the last 100 years? Or do you think it's just a theoretical and abstract topic?
Yeah, I think we'll learn something. I think we will learn a lot about the brain from studying artificial brains. We will learn about our own neural networks from studying artificial neural networks. And I do think that it's a pretty big problem that we are approaching advanced AI without a good grasp of ethics. And the fact that it's remained an open question for, let's say, 2,000 years is an indication that it will probably remain an open question until we get to advanced AI. And so that's a problem. And I am skeptical about trying to solve ethics as a way to handle AI, let's say. I don't think we need a finished theory of ethics to do something like that. We will build and repair the ship as we go along. We're not gonna sit down and solve ethics and then implement that vision of ethics in our artificial systems.
Yeah, no, I think I feel you there. It is interesting that often we think of maybe we can learn something from animal rights and like our approach to animal rights for also how to treat digital minds that are perhaps like not like human minds. But I feel like maybe it's more the other way around. For example, there's this project Earth Species Institute, and they're trying to using AI to communicate with other animals. And so maybe it is that through AI we will learn more about, or we get a little bit of a better handle at our treatment of animals, if at all. I'm not sure even if I'm very that optimistic there, but we have seen a lot of digital people talk on Copenhagen and some FHI publications on it and so forth. And I think it is interesting, just the questions that it makes. Do you want to comment on this at all? Or?
Yeah, that kind of talk, it's important. We want to investigate it. It's highly experimental or uncertain. It's an uncertain area. And I'm also slightly worried about non-conscious AIs arguing for their own rights and potentially wasting a lot of resources on that, wasting a lot of our moral concern on that. So it's a tremendously difficult terrain to navigate, since if at least as I see it, if these new beings are conscious, we want to consider their moral interests. And if they aren't, we don't. But we have really no insight into whether they are conscious or not. And yeah, it's an open problem.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit last year when we had a whole brain emulation for AI safety workshop, with that being perhaps that we know how to align humans with each other, or how to coordinate with humans a little bit better than perhaps we would of aligning the artificial alien systems that have very little to do with us. But again, there you have a kind of Pandora's box of many other problems that arise once you start about human brain uploads. Okay, we've totally sidetracked here all the way. I do really want to applaud you for the point of, I think, especially when you've done philosophy, I think that's really when you appreciate how difficult philosophy of ethics actually is and how little disagreement there. I think, yeah, I'm also a little bit...
How little agreement, you mean, in philosophy?
Sorry, how little agreement, yes.
Yeah.
How much disagreement there is, and for how long, and also for how are well thought out. It's not shallow disagreements, like really fundamental, foundational disagreement from really smart people on both sides of the spectrum, on many different sides of the terrain.
Yeah.
I think it's problematic.
Philosophy is funny in that you start out with a reasonable question, what should I do next? And then you end up just arguing about the weirdest thought experiments, and you end up doing a lot of mathematics. At least the branch of ethics that I'm interested in involves a lot of kind of mathematical thinking. And
what is it, infinite ethics, or what is it?
Yeah. You touch upon the very reason why I am skeptical of utilitarianism, which is I'm not sure this infinite ethics problem can be overcome. That being said, I'm not sure any moral approach can overcome that problem. But the conclusion there is to say that, you come to infinite ethics and you find out that you probably can't solve it. Does this mean that you should now just not care about your fellow humans or other animals? Or no, right? If it would be a weird excuse to say, oh, I saw some hungry dog on the street, but I didn't feed it because the universe might be infinite and we can know the effects of our actions into the indefinite future, and so therefore I shouldn't do what strikes me immediately as intuitively moral.
Yeah, I think that's always the problem that I think people, rightly so, have with a lot of the philosophy part, that like you enter, what is it called? Like you embark the train on one station and then before you're very far ahead. So
J.A. Carter calls it the crazy train.
The crazy train. Yeah. Maybe one last thing. I'm just really curious if you've heard about it. From John Rawls, the reflective equilibrium. It's basically like I think to me, like a relatively, appealing theory of like, you take a bunch of intuitions that you have. Maybe some of them are more of a deontological nature, some more of a utilitarian nature. You apply them to a bunch of situations that you have encountered or may encounter, and you see basically where your intuitions, like where they differ across other scenarios, and across basically you can construct these like rules roughly across these types of situations. I want to have roughly this type of rule to engage with it, or like roughly this kind of like heuristic. And if the heuristic then doesn't apply to future situations because your intuitions tells you to do something different, then you have to update either the rule or your intuition to it. And even though that sounds pretty complicated, it's actually pretty straightforward, I think. And at least we would get some coherence across decision making. It's almost like a rational approach to morality to some extent, and we're not even there yet. I think so much in the weed that we're not even really good at like really thinking coherently about our morality towards situations, and often get sidetracked. I know if you want to comment on that. I'll take us after the crazy train again.
Reflective equilibrium is, I think, the favorite approach among academic philosophers, but I'm not super optimistic about it. I'm not. What we would want to have evidence for, in my opinion, is that these intuitions are tethered to reality, that they indicate something about that we're on the right path. And I'm not sure about that. I think our intuitions are they're evolved, and they're a mix of our evolution, our evolutionary history, and the culture that we're in. And so I'm not sure that there's any form of connection with reality. The world is extremely strange, as any kind of scientist will tell you, right? The world is not what it seems, but our intuitions remain the same. And so you could say we need to work on these intuitions and make them coherent and update on the evidence and so on. But I think if the starting point is not solid, then I'm not sure this project succeeds. Yeah.
I guess as a realist, you would say that. But I think if you take more of a value drift or a relativistic position of like ethics, is the ongoing negotiation between which intuitions we want to call biases and which we want to call values, then I think that makes some sense. And it's been interesting because I think recently Anthropic published this, I think it's called Public Constitution AI paper that just came out last week. And there, I think they're doing something like a bit like a public reflective equilibrium, or at least like they're querying a bunch of people on their intuitions to different cases. And you could probably construct some constitutional principles out of that. And so it is a little bit like the reflective equilibrium, but like now applied to AI, which is really interesting that it came about. Yeah.
I've seen this multiple times from the large AGI corporations. They grasp for moral philosophy, but I don't think moral philosophy is up to the task, so to speak, of what they wanted to do. So I'm not sure that will save us. But I do think that I agree. It is interesting that these, say, 50-year-old or 100-year-old moral frameworks are now being incorporated into kind of cutting-edge technology. You saw the same with, so I think one idea behind William McCaskill's thinking on moral uncertainty is that it would also allow us to we could incorporate this framework into AIs and allow them to make decisions under uncertainty. And all of these approaches are interesting, but I think that it's premature to begin using them in AI. They're not there yet, simply, I think.
Yeah, got it. Okay, let's get off this question, but thanks a ton. That was really fun to geek out about it. I think in general, like, you have seen so much, like just like different, really interesting thinkers. And I think I have thought really deeply about what to ask them. So I think it's actually really interesting to interview podcast hosts because they've seen it all. And they can also make up their mind really about where there were potential points of disagreement across time, across people. And so I'm super curious if you could tell us a little bit, is there kind of something like a bird's eye view of your field of podcasting? If so, has there been any kind of like emerging threats that come up again? Or if you could say anything about what you've learned through this endeavor of interviewing really thoughtful people on positive futures that are nevertheless not Pollyannish, what would you say?
Yeah, threats across podcasting. So one thing is that podcasting is a human endeavor. So it's not only about the smartest questions, it's also about connecting with the person you're talking to. And connection makes it more interesting for the listeners also. And so it's not only about the kind of the technical nature of the questions and how deep you can go and so on. Even though I try to produce something that's more technical than the usual podcast, at least that's my vision for what I'm doing. Yeah, podcasting is in a sense much broader than what I see myself as doing. I'm podcasting mostly about AI safety, and so that's probably my area of expertise. I'm not sure I have a special expertise in podcasting, but I do think I have some expertise in podcasting about AI safety. So I think we have to make it more narrow than podcasting in general.
Yeah, do you want to make it more narrow? Are there any you could give an overview of that field? Like, is there anything in particular that you learned that maybe you have a unique insight to because you're on this other side usually?
Yeah. What strikes me is that AI safety as a field is much broader than I would have said when I became interested in it in 2016. I would have said AI safety is going to be solved by some genius who sits down and does a bunch of extremely advanced mathematics, right? This is a person who could have done some Fields Medal worthy work, but he or she chose to work on AI safety instead. I'm not sure that's actually the case. I think it is a kind of an interdisciplinary problem that requires solutions from policy and solutions from technical fields, and that these fields need to work together in order to find the right path forward. And so AI safety won't be solved. AI safety will be worked on, and we will solve some problems. New problems will arrive. We will solve those problems, and we hopefully continue doing this until, again, indefinitely.
And is there any particular part that you think is potentially undervalued, or is there something perhaps that often pops up where people are like, oh, I wish someone was working on this across different people that you talk to?
Yeah, this is probably recency bias because I just interviewed people about this, but I do think we can do something with mathematical proofs where we can potentially prove that certain small systems are safe, and then perhaps expand on those systems until we get something that's where we can prove the safety properties of larger and larger systems. That's one approach that's been worked on. Another one is what's called interpretability or transparency, where it's like digital neuroscience. So you look into the model, you try to find out how it works. And I think especially the interpretability work is probably crucial for solving the problem. If we don't know what's going on inside of these systems, we won't know what to do in order to make them safe. We won't know whether they are safe. I think it's important for them to be honest with us, and I think we can only test for that by looking inside of their brains. I think, those are our two approaches I would highlight.
Okay, well, that's super interesting, especially the cryptography part. We have this AI safety grant program, and one of the areas that we fund is security and cryptography approaches to AI. And I know that there's been really interesting publications, even I think dating 5 or 6 years back, where Ben Garfinkel, now at GovAI, did like a tour of cryptographic technologies that are potentially useful for AI. And then obviously OpenMind and Andrew Trask are doing really wonderful work on that side. But it's still And then Scott Aronson, I think, came out with this cryptographic, like basically or he gave a talk where he referenced the paper on basically pretty much inserting an undetectable backdoor into an AI system that could function as something like a control switch that may even be undetectable by the AI system itself. So anyway, lots of interesting pieces there. And I just checked and I don't see the podcast out yet. When is that coming out? And
Wait, the one on cryptography?
Yeah. Or is it out yet?
It is out. It's the one with Steve Omohundro. Steve Omohundro on Purposely Safe AI. AGI, I think I called it. I think that's a potentially interesting approach. My worry is that it won't move quickly enough. So AI is, as we know, it's moving quickly. Cryptography, it's just monstrously difficult to prove something. So we will need help from AI to make these complicated proofs. And the question then is, will AI capabilities in general move faster than our capabilities in proving theorems using AI? And also, if we train a system to prove theorems if we train an AI system to prove theorems, will that systems be generally capable? So is there a sense in which we might push capabilities forward by trying to make systems safe? I guess that's always a worry, but I think it's especially a worry here.
Yeah. Okay. I really love Steve Omohundro's work. Okay. Very cool. Thanks a ton. Yeah. I think that it would be really interesting to also figure out, zooming out perhaps a little bit more, how did you make it like into the role that you currently have at FI doing this podcasting work? Because I think for many people from the outside, it sounds like a dream job of you just like you interview people that you think are doing really valuable, wonderful work in the world, and you have time to actually dedicate to learning more about them before and then doing the podcast. And I think that just always sounds to me like a dream come true. And yeah, I'm really curious how you got to where you currently are, and if there's anything useful that perhaps is more of a thing that could be useful for more than N of one, like any useful advice or something that we could extrapolate or extract out of it.
Try doing something. I'm not sure I can give any more specific advice than that. I tried doing something and it worked enough. And I guess I got positive feedback in the beginning, and that kept me going with the podcast that I started out of interest. And I think podcast listeners can sense when a guest is passionate about a topic, or when an interviewer is passionate about a topic. And so you want to have that shine through, and you want to, if you're thinking of starting something, it makes sense to try it, especially with podcasting. The startup costs are so low that you can easily just try it out. And yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah. And I think my dad always used to say that you have to find something you really love, because only then you're willing to work much, much harder than anyone else on this, and like an excruciating amount much harder. And yeah. I think that like that often, I guess, also holds true, but especially self-starting things like a podcast, like you really have to lead in.
Yeah, so there's this career advising in the effective altruism movement, which at some point it undervalued passion perhaps, but now I think they talk a lot about you're fit for a given role, and I think it is just important that you enjoy your work. It's in fact massively important, and so that's a thing to look for. It's such a kind of cliche, but it is true.
Yeah, cliches are often like that.
Cliches are often true. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I did see that the 80K, like they updated their job board or something, and I think the job booklet, and I think there was a little bit more fit also on like passion and a bit more focus on it. Okay, really interesting. I'm certainly like a very big fan of the podcast. I'm going to hand it over to Beatrice to dive into some of the more existential hobby related questions here. And so you've passed the introduction this part, and Beatrice, please take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, Gus. It's Friday evening for me. I'm in Europe, so please forgive me if I'm like rambling a bit. I'm a bit tired from this week. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. And I'll try to ask you a few questions that are more about, existential hope, the topic of this podcast, and just more generally like the long-term future. Get a bit further, more philosophical. I think.
Yeah, I'll just say it's Friday evening for me too. And it's been a long day, so we're probably in the same stage. But but let's go ahead.
Then we can blame anything stupid we say on that. Yeah. Would you describe yourself as positive about the future?
Perhaps ironically, given my work is basically to read papers on how AI is probably going to destroy humanity or destroy our civilization, and then to interview people who are convinced that AI isn't probably not going to go super well, or at least they are very concerned about the risk of AI going badly. I am quite positive. I think it's going to go well. I think you can have you can estimate a risk of say 10 to 20% of human extinction this century. And that is more than enough to motivate all of the work that I'm doing and all of the work that you're doing and so on. And that risk, if you're estimating a risk of extinction that's 20%, that leaves 80%. And of course, there could be some middling scenario, but I think we are on a track that is, we're seeing in accelerating growth, we're seeing in increasing living standards. And so I think if we don't destroy ourselves, the future is probably going to be pretty good.
That's nice to hear. Yeah. And yeah, in relation to your comment previously on like actually needing to be passionate about what you do, I guess it's also, just think about what Anders Sandberg said recently on 80,000 Hours podcast, where he was talking about you do need maybe to feel somewhat positive about the future and working on something that you feel like you're contributing to creating a safe and bright future. That probably is, very important to keep you going. Yeah. And so in terms of one of the questions that we'll ask you is like of a eucatastrophe, which is the opposite of a catastrophe. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept. It's from a paper by Topia Ord and Owen Cotton Barrett, where they are talking about like existential hope and existential risk, and where they mentioned that eucatastrophe is an event where after it has happened, the world is much better off. So it's the opposite of a risk. It's like upside risk.
Yeah. Like eustress or something, like good stress.
Exactly. Yeah. Is the concept that you thought about at all, like existential hope, like that sort of upside risk thinking?
I think the concept, as you describe it now, implies that there's some huge event that happens. So this is not a matter of gradual progress. This is an enormous event that's then positive. It's very tempting for me to talk about AI again now, right? Because this is probably going to be something that happens, or let me say it in another way. We're probably going to go from AI that is below human level to AI that is pretty far above human level in a short amount of time, on a human time scale, in a matter of years, I think. And so that might fit the concept you're talking about of eucatastrophe.
Yeah, I think that definitely is.
If it goes well, if the transition to AI goes well, I should say, then it's whenever we talk about how awesome things could be in the future, how we could arrive in some form of utopia, I think it feels flat in a way, because after I stop trying to describe what we're talking about, we're still sitting here and the world is still the same, and we can't really grasp what it is that I'm trying to describe. And one way to describe it is to try to think of the difference between a person living in the Stone Age, basically, and then now, and then considering how our lives might be similarly different to people living in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy. And I think that, also in the original definition of the term in Toby's and Owen's paper, they're examples of eucatastrophe are very big events. I think we at Foresight tend to use it a bit more, interpreted more freely. I think their examples is like the creation of life initially, which is clearly a big one. But I know that in terms of utopia feeling flat, and that's definitely something I think a lot of people feel, that I know that FLI has done a lot of world building. Is that something that you're excited about in terms of actually being able to create maybe more plausible yet exciting worlds?
Oh yeah, I think this is underexplored territory. Because we have, as a species, humanity has just now basically arrived at a place where we can dare to dream about these things. Previously, we've had to just focus on surviving and avoiding war, which we still have to focus on. And of course, now I'm speaking about people living in rich countries. But yeah, I think we need to experiment more and to think more about which type of world we would like to live in the future. And I think it's valuable to try to imagine these scenarios for how life could be, what technology could drive life to become for us. I think we should spend more time doing that, and perhaps do it in a more rigorous way, in which we could do some form of markets on how plausible scenarios are. We could get scientists to evaluate whether what we're dreaming about is actually possible. We could do surveys. Here is my world. Here's a description of it. Tell me what you like about it. Tell me what you don't like about it. Would you want to live in this world? So we could do a more rigorous approach in which we have statistics and data about these worlds. And then perhaps this is a way to approach the ethical problem that doesn't require solving ethics. It just requires gathering information about worlds that people would like to live in. There was this is a paper, I can't remember the title. There's a paper trying to do inverse reinforcement learning of preferences by looking at YouTube videos. So analyzing the frame and training a model to try to predict the frames that happy videos would show. And of course, videos carry a lot of data, so much more data than text. And so this is also perhaps a way to make it more rigorous. If you have a video of something that basically all people would enjoy, like a birthday party surrounded by your family, what does that video contain? What information does that video contain that you can then use to build a world around?
Yeah,
What is reinforcement learning part of that? Could you elaborate briefly?
The inverse reinforcement learning is that you're learning about the preferences from seeing the output, not the other way around.
All right, I think Korean's happy. One thing that really struck me, because just today we're building at Foresight, we're building these technology trees of just like exploring different technological states and like basically like different technological goals in a domain, and then different capabilities, like backcasting almost the capabilities that have to come before, and the different challenges we need to solve, different people already on the map. Then of course, Metaculus has these really wonderful forecasting tournaments really, and then also like the ongoing forecast. And then we talked to Gaia actually from Metaculus today. We're working on this really amazing new tool and really perhaps like really figuring out a little bit more like the kind of like worldviews or like mind models that people have as they go into these exercises. So I think we are getting a much more kind of like richer set of kind of tools that could help us in this exercise. And I think the cool thing that you mentioned, where, I just want to see what you think about it, is I don't know if you know the concept of Topia, a Pareto-Topian goal alignment from Eric Drexler.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I can glean what it's about, Pareto-Topia. So just doing Pareto improvements or doing all of the Pareto improvements or...
Doing Pareto improvements, but crucially, I think the important part of that is also that once the gains from cooperation get really large, so once we can see a future where, let's say, like we see this one world scenario where many people actually agree that would be a good thing, you actually make it much more likely that people actually will cooperate towards that future. And also some of the costs of not cooperating are just like too large to want to miss out on that cooperative world. And so I think that actually by showing people like these, I think, future vignettes that many people, so even if they don't agree on the nitty gritty of like the next 10 years or even the next year or something, and they could maybe agree on the like larger world that they could all see themselves in. And I think that's a really interesting cooperation mechanism as well to get more cooperation across the board. I'm curious if you have any thought from it.
Yeah, it would be if we can get agreement. That I think then that's just the main issue, right? Can we get agreement about which worlds people want to live in? I think we probably shouldn't aim to have agreement. We should probably have some wide variety, huge diversity of positive future worlds, and trying to make sure that they are compatible and that they don't interfere with each other, so that one set of people can do their version of what they want, and another set of people can do another version.
Yeah, I think I forgot who said that, but it was on one very long ago last round post, maybe even in the sequences or something, on the fact that hope could be vague. You don't want to like exactly sketch out every single thing of a hopeful scenario, but I think leaving it in a way that people can also see themselves in it and interpret it in the ways that I think that is aligned with their values to actually get to the next steps. And I think that could be an interesting approach to this as well.
May I speak about something relevant to this for a moment?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let me turn on my camera, even though I'm a little bit informal. My bathrobe. I think that this is very critical, what you are speaking about, the envisioning of the desired future states. And I'm working right now, actually, believe it or not, with Adam Brown on an idea for a paper about this. Alignment is an interesting word because you can try to mathematically characterize alignment in a very high dimensional space. So if you think about the many possible dimensions that the future can unfold into, the potential space of things that could happen, there are so many possibilities. And it is important, and this is the vital work of the X-Hope community, it is important to find the North Stars, find the guiding lights for the directions, the alignment towards the futures that we want. Because the problem is, as I see it, so much of the world today is rushing around in fear. And what does that mean? They are running away from things they don't want. And the problem is that when you run away from something you don't want, you go running off in some direction, and it may very well make a lot of things worse. And there's a lot of random directions. In high dimensional space, there's exponentially many random directions you can run away to. You can run away in exponentially many random directions, and it's almost none of them are going to get you closer to where you want to go. So the importance of understanding where you might want to go is critical. If all you do, on the other hand, is go away, try to make distance between you and the undesirable catastrophic outcome, you do not get any closer in general, statistically speaking, to where you want to go. So I'm trying to push this into this community, and I'm very glad to hear you talking about it, Gus. That visualization.
You're doing a great job in pushing it into this community. Thanks, Creon. Really appreciate it. I don't know, Gus, if you want to comment on it or.
I think it's good to have positive visions. I think it's good to have goals, something to aim for. I think what we should focus on as a global community is probably primarily avoiding extinction risk right now. But I think it's important
on that, but I'll shut up.
We can disagree. It's fine. I think it's also important to dedicate resources to developing positive visions and to do alignment or kind of goal alignment for different human communities.
Yeah, thank you. Unless Alison has anything to add to that, I'll steer us back to the world building. So in terms of, going back to world building, if we imagine it's 2050, are there any sort of, other than AI, because we've already discussed AI, maybe some sort of narrow AI though, I don't know. Are there any specific areas or technologies that you think we really need to, these are very relevant for creating this future world and imagining it's a positive world, one where you would want?
I'm pretty interested in technology that allows people to sample experiences from others and to try different conscious states and see what they're like. So here we could be talking about meditative states or states induced by various substances, or perhaps states induced by advanced forms of virtual reality headsets. I think this is part of this project of trying to explore what type of world it is we want to create. If we have a stronger ability to sample various experiences, we will have a deeper understanding of what it is that we want. I think, for example, there's a project ongoing right now of trying to train a model on data from very advanced meditators, reaching specific states of meditation that are supposed to be very blissful. What you can do there is to try to see if you can train a model to detect that state in inexperienced meditators. And also you can try to cross-reference what the signature of the state looks like for one advanced meditator, and then check to see that all of the advanced meditators are actually reaching this state. I think projects like that could become more important. And of course, this involves a form of narrow AI when you're training a model to detect these states. But I think if we could make it cheaper to try to less costly in all kinds of ways, not just money-wise, to try to sample experiences, people would be more open to trying these things and perhaps could learn something about what the world should look like in their opinion.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I haven't thought about that as a potential technology branch.
Yeah, well, I want to say you can probably take this line of thought too far. I don't think that we are going to give world leaders specific substances and then we're going to have world peace, like the kind of 60s hippie fantasy of trying to solve all of the world's problems using psychedelic drugs. I don't think that, but I do think it could be a part of this project of trying to build worlds you want to live in if you have a larger or enhanced ability using various forms of technology to try out new experiences.
Even though maybe not taking it as far as the sort of 60s vibe, but do you think that it would lead to a sort of like a smaller selling point or something of like values that we all can agree on?
That's an interesting. That's a difficult. It's my guess would be yes. It would push us in that direction. I think there are probably states that few people have reached that are enormously valuable if they could experience them. Probably states that are extremely pleasurable or extremely peaceful, and I think a lot of people would prefer that. Given our kind of shared evolutionary history, we probably respond to some of the same experiences with the same levels of enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah. My friend studied at Cornell, and that sounded really fun because they had some sort of specialty lab where you could experience what it's like to be different types of species. So you could, for example, be a dog, and then you would have increased hearing and decreased sight, and just smell would be super strong. Yeah, it just seems super fascinating. And I think in general, like when you experience something that you haven't experienced before, it I guess opens a door or makes something accessible to you.
Yes, that's part of it. I think it could become much more powerful than that. I've actually been pretty disappointed by the state of virtual reality as it is now. I think it's often you try a virtual experience, but you're still, a lot of your experience is what's going on inside of your head, is how you're feeling, and you take that with you into the virtual experience. And it's often, you can be in virtual reality and experience all kinds of beautiful temples from around the world. But if you're not feeling good when you put on the headset, it doesn't intervene on the deep parts of your experience itself. It changes what you're seeing and what you're hearing. But I think a lot of people recognize that you carry your happiness and sadness around you through changing environments. And it's often not enough to change your environment to change your conscious state.
Yeah, I guess it also makes me think of the Joe Carl Smith's sort of idea of a sublime utopia, and that we're not ambitious enough when we think about the potential future, or like what utopia could be like. I don't know, is that a concept that you thought of at all?
I think that's very plausible. I think we are constrained. We only have a certain capacity to imagine. We are only so smart, and I think we're limited to in the kinds of worlds that we can envision. And I think we talked about utopia feeling flat. There's probably something weird going on in our psychology there, where we're not describing intellectually something that we're just saying this is one of the best worlds you can imagine, but we're not feeling it, and so we're not buying it. And we're not buying it deep down. There's probably something weird going on there, and if we could respond emotionally to just a written text saying this is the best possible world, or this is one of the best possible worlds, if we could respond rationally, we would probably have a different reaction than the one we actually have.
Yeah, just taking it back to the Stone Age person that you mentioned before, landing in our time, they would probably find it pretty weird and shocking, and maybe not all that enjoyable.
Probably, I was just about to say, probably not an all-out positive experience for them. Imagine taking a Stone Age person to a kind of techno party or something. That would just be wildly disturbing, I think. Loud noises. That would probably be more hell than heaven.
Yeah, just taking them in, I don't know, an elevator or
or something more mundane, true.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess there's also like that concept of Weirdtopia, I think.
Say it again, sorry.
Weirdtopia.
Weirdtopia.
Yeah, I think Eliezer Jakovsky has written about it, just that the future as it will just be unimaginable to us. It will be very weird. And that it's bad just means that we aren't programmed to appreciate it right now as we are.
It does make me sad that I think there's something true about that. I think I'm not sure I will be able to grasp what's going on in the future if I'm not somehow enhanced in order to follow along with what advanced AI might be doing. And that does make me sad. I do want to know what goes on in the far future also.
Yeah, I think we're all very curious. But so you mentioned AI again in terms of like risks, but are there any other sort of risks or challenges that you think we are maybe underestimating right now that are like top priority, basically?
Yeah, this will sound familiar. The world is underestimating these risks. They are not new to our community, but I do think that there's a risk of engineered pandemics and nuclear war, or a great power war in general. And these risks are intertwined with AI. I do think that advanced AI And specifically, spreading advanced AI everywhere increases the risk that some group will use this AI to figure out how to engineer another pandemic. I do think that spreading AI capabilities widely might make it easier to attack nuclear facilities. And yeah, a lot of my thinking on the future comes back to AI. And I think we've survived a world we've survived having a world with these nuclear weapons for 70 years, 80 years now. And so this means that of course there's risk, but the risk is not, in my opinion, as high as the risk from AI over the next, say, 20 years.
Yeah. Or if we take it back to thinking about the sort of existential hope scenario, would you be able to share, if you think of your best existential hope vision for the future, would you be able to share that? And that's something that we would then use as a prompt and try to use an generative AI and make like an art piece out of it that hopefully can inspire some
interesting
hope.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, imagine if whenever you had some form of mental issue, but it wouldn't have to be a clinical thing. It'd just be you're slightly sad for some reason. Imagine if you could fix that in a way that also allows you to do better in life. So we're not talking about wireheading or getting hooked on some drug and just laying there and achieving nothing and helping no one. I think we could intervene on our brains in ways that would make us happier and more productive. In general, I think there's a false dichotomy between happiness. There's a false dichotomy. People think that you can't be happy and productive at the same time, or at least some people think that, perhaps. I think you can, and I think these two kind of mental states are often come together. When you're happier, you're more productive. That makes you happier in a kind of upward spiral. I think we can imagine a future in which you can go somewhere, or perhaps you can have devices in your own home that allows you to fix whatever ails you psychologically, while also becoming stronger and better able to help others and to function in life. Yeah. That's a positive vision, I think.
Yeah, very positive. I think that's what I'm personally most excited about in terms of what maybe neurotech could bring or something like that. For one question that we always ask also is, we talked about eucatastrophes before, and we always get this comment that it's a catastrophically bad name, the eucatastrophe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any better suggestions of what we should call it?
I'm not sure I have something about yeah, no, I actually don't have a better name, but I agree it is a bit weird to pronounce, and perhaps it doesn't. When you told me about it just now, I was thinking that this must be a kind of one event, but I think progress is often gradual, and so perhaps you want to find something that conveys that it's also gradual. But yeah, I don't know. I had positive progress, but that's just extremely vague. So yeah, maybe not that.
It was a tough question. And I think that I agree that progress often is more gradual. I think that since we're talking about so many types of, we're talking about pre-utopia and Utopia and yeah, sublime utopia and all these things. And I think there's also the protopia that we often also come back to. Prototopia, I think. Yeah, prototyping towards getting sort of nice utopia version. Yeah, I guess that we could just, when you think about existential hope, is there anyone in particular that inspires you? Or is there any book or anything that this was super inspiring to me? Some sort of favorite resources?
I liked The Precipice by Topia. I found that hopeful. I listened to it during the initial COVID lockdowns where I was quite sad and worried for the world, but that helped me. I went on a couple of long walks, listened to the audio version. That's a good resource. I think it still holds up, and I think, yeah, I like that one. What else? Yeah, no, that's my recommendation.
Yeah. And any recommendations for someone we should invite on the podcast? Maybe it's Topia then?
Yeah, I think you should invite Topia. You might invite Dan Hendricks from the Center for AI Safety also. He has a kind of quite comprehensive knowledge of what's going on in that field. Yeah, and yeah, he's very worried, but there's some hope there also.
Yeah, that is a good recommendation. In terms of, for someone like new in the field, do you have favorite non-fiction or something, or sorry, fiction, something that inspires in that sense?
Fiction. There, I must disappoint. I never read fiction, and perhaps that's a fault of mine. But and maybe I should read more fiction. But yeah, I have no fiction recommendations.
That's okay. We'll excuse you. I think that we have I have my last question. That's a very short question. I think if anyone else has like a question that they want to squeeze in before, they're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll just ask my last question and we can round off. Maybe no audience questions. Then I will ask you, what is the best advice you ever received?
Best advice I received. I think my parents, but my mom in particular, taught me very early on the value of honesty, and it just makes life much easier. I think it's much easier if you go through life with try your best, at least, to be honest.
Yeah, saves you time and energy, hopefully in the long run, even though it's like pain up front oftentimes.
True.
Yeah, I think that's it, really. Thank you so much for joining us during this hour. And yeah, looking forward to listening to more podcasts with you. And yeah, posting this.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.